Hey everyone, John here. Good Friday morning. How is it going? We are at the end of the week and things are going to get exciting as we continue to move into the holiday season. For most people, we have a short week next week. For most, the rest of us, yeah, it's a normal week in the grind right before the holiday season. So definitely a lot going on. Definitely need to make sure we're prepared for next week. And we got our goals aligned that we're finishing out this week with our crushed goals and going into next week for the closeout goals. And more, I'm seeing you guys are starting your 2024 goals, which is super exciting. Super happy to see that. Super happy to hear that and be a part of that. And definitely rooting for you guys, cheering you on to continue that momentum. So that way, when you touch January of 2024, you're like, man, I'm already in March. Don't even worry about it. So exciting stuff, cool stuff. Glad you guys are just crushing it like you do every day. So I got a really neat topic we need to talk about today, especially since we've been on this week about teamwork and team development and surrounding yourself with the right people and all those things. But a really good question came up, and it was should you judge a company based on bad managers? So, should you? What do you guys think about that? Should you, or a job, a person who's searching for a job, um, should they judge a company based on some bad managers, right? And you really need to think about this because the the main thing you hear about a lot of this stuff is that people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad managers. And I thoroughly agree with this. I 100% agree with this. There are people who do leave bad companies, so don't get it twisted. You could still have a really good manager and leave a really bad company, right? That does exist. But I think a lot more times than not, people leave a company because of the bad manager. So, should you judge a company by a bad manager? Well, I'm going to go off and say, and I think a few of you agree, that yes, you definitely should judge a company by a bad manager. But, and I'll caveat with a but it's really on the basis of how long that manager has been in that position, that situation, and how frequent are the complaints about the said manager. And here's why I say that. You know, so this manager is going to be in one of two scenarios. He's going to be a brand new to the role, new to leadership manager. Hasn't had much time in the role. He's figuring his life out, his or her life out, trying to understand what it means to be a leader, trying to figure out things, and is reverting back to the only management style they've ever known, right? So keep that in mind. But if this is a manager who's been in the position for an extenuated amount of time, a year plus, right? I'll venture off. I'll give them a year of leeway, a year plus, and they're consistently getting the same complaints. Everything is bad, this and that. Then yes, that is a bad company. And well, why would you say that, John? Well, good question. I would say that because what that's telling you is if upper management and the company as a whole is not doing anything with that manager to fix the issue, to correct them, to train them, to do what they got to do to fix the complaints and the issues, that means the behavior is an accepted and tolerated behavior. So therefore, the company says this is okay. Therefore, that is a bad company, right? This is how toxic environments grow. This is how they're able to spread. Because if you're not going to take action on bad and poor leadership and the mistreatment of your people, guess what? You, whether you be the CEO, the director, the president, the board, if you're not fixing the issue, you're not doing anything to fix the issue, you're not putting your foot down, you have said this is okay behavior and we will accept and tolerate it. You are now a bad company, a bad organization, and people aren't going to want to work for you, right? And there's one thing I tell a lot of these, hiring managers, directors, a few CEOs in a few cases is, um, if you are not measuring the right KPIs, you are letting bad toxic leadership run. And I'll give you an example. I had one company I talked to, and they wanted to talk about this one manager they had and how he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And oh, his department's always doing this. So I looked into the numbers. I said, okay, let me look into this. What's going on? Well, They were right on the one metrics they were measuring, that that department did indeed make the $100,000 that they said they did. What they did not look at was the 8 employees who left in that year time frame that actually costed them about $200,000 to replace. Well, how'd you come up with that number, John? Well, good question. Because for this particular role that the people kept leaving was a very specific IT role that required a very few specific credentials. So they were averaging about $11,000 per person that they had to hire on. Okay. Well, John, hey, if you only had 8 at $11,000, that's only $88,000. Okay, cool. You're right. That's just the hiring process. What about the lost job time to find that person? What about the lost productivity for people not working? Well, what about that one guy who now had to cover down on that person's work? So now they're trying to do double the work, but they're only doing it half as efficiently. So therefore, you kind of lost four people's worth of work. Oh, but now they're overly stressed, and the bad manager's still giving them a hard time for not meeting deadlines, so they quit. So now you're out 2 people, and you're starting the process. So you know, this process continues because sometimes you can't, especially a very specialized role, you can't hire immediately. So by the time you factored in the lost information, the lost continuity, the lag time it took to get people back into the role, then you had to train up those people for that role. Then they had to get going. Then they had to get proficient, able to operate on their own independently. Again, you're talking about a $200,000 loss. So guess what? Guess what he cost the company? His $100,000 profit is actually a $100,000 loss. And yes, I simplified the numbers a little bit for easy math because I do have a California education, right? No pun on the public education system in California, but yeah, I was in the 90s, and that's how that works. But keep that in mind, though. That's real basic math. And once I kind of brought that up, I'm like, hey, this is what your bad manager does. I was like, if you were not measuring the turnover in a department, that's huge. And it's one thing when people leave because they're excelling, they're growing, they're like, hey, listen, thank you for everything. You're doing good. You just don't have that next higher role available for me, and I need to move on to continue to grow. That's one thing. But when you have a huge turnover for people leaving for other like positions in other companies, possibly your competitors, that's talent you're losing that you're paying for in multiple ways because it still costed you to bring them on board. Now it's going to cost you to bring someone else on board. Now it's also costing you the lost productivity from losing that person, and the lost continuity, the lost knowledge base if you don't have a good centralized system for information. So an information dump or receptacle, whatever you have in place. So you got to keep those things in mind. All those factors in. So if you get really upset when you say, "Oh, you shouldn't judge," uh, a company based on its bad managers, well, you probably should if it's a prolonged issue, because that leads to toxic environments. But I want to hear what you guys think about that. What do you feel? Do you feel I'm off the mark? Do you feel I'm right? Are we hitting in the right area? So let me hear from you guys. I want to know what you think. Did you have one of those bad managers? Have you left a position because of bad leadership? Have you gone in and stayed with a company that was maybe doing bad, but it had good leadership that were turning it around? Because culture takes a little time to turn around. It's not an instant fix. So let me hear from you guys. Let's end this Friday with the bang. Let's get ready for next week. Hey guys, I'm always here for you. Love talking with you. Love hearing your stories, and can't wait to see where this goes. All right, guys, stay good.